Death Note.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Danny here, and today I'm talking to you about Platinum End. So Platinum End is written by Takeshi Obata and drawn by Sugumi Oba. And yes, these are the duo that did Death Note and Bakuman, both of, Shonen Jump fame. And of course, this is serialized in Shonen Jump, but it's Jump Square. That's the monthly magazine that Shueisha owns, one of many. And this particular magazine holds Claymore, Blue Exorcist, Seraph of the End, Rosario Vampire, when that got season 2. World Trigger moved here. I didn't even know that. And of course, a bunch of other good mangas from Jump. This came out in November 2015 and just ended in January of 2021. I didn't even know going into this that it was already over. But I figured, I've been seeing this here and there, and I figured it was time to check it out because, I do like this duo. Death Note, of course, is infamous for its popularity, and I was a big fan of Bakuman back in the day. I thought that was a really solid manga, and especially with the mangas that the mangakas wrote in that series. They were all very different series throughout, and they were good enough to stand alone as their own series, which I think Crows from Bakuman was its own series for a bit. I'm not sure. I have to look more into that. But anywho, here we are with their latest series, Platinum End. So let's go ahead and get right into this. It stars our main character, Kakahashi, and he is just graduating middle school? High school? I think it's middle school. And it starts off very bleak, no dialogue. We see him at the ceremony by himself, depressed at his desk. Next thing you know, he's just walking throughout Japan, goes through the tallest building in the area, and decides to jump and kill himself. And right before he falls down to his death, he is saved by an angel named Nase and tells him, "I'm here to bring you hope, give you a second chance at life. There's a lot of things that happened, but you deserve another chance." He's very confused, doesn't really know what to think of it. And Nase decides to give him this power to where he has wings and a thing called a red arrow. And as floored as he is by flying in the air, he is then explained that this red arrow, whoever he strikes with it, falls in love with them for the next 33 days. And it's a type of love that it's hard to refuse any questions or requests that you give them. So he uses this opportunity to test what Nase was telling him about the tragic death of his parents were actually caused by his aunt and uncle. So it goes to his aunt, strikes her with the red arrow, obviously starts falling in love, starting to turn into a hentai a little bit. But then, as he gains his composure, asks her, "So what really happened?" And it's like, "Well, yeah, I'm sorry, we sabotaged it, it was your uncle's idea. And if we took you in as a foster parents, guardians, we were going to be able to get that insurance money." And that was the goal in mind, right? Pretty crazy to see. And as heartbreaking and shocking this is for Kakahashi, right? And we see the uncle upset, yelling at his wife. And then Kakahashi's like, "I wish you guys just died instead. Why did it have to be my parents?" And then shockingly, we see his aunt grab a knife from the kitchen and stab herself in the neck, traumatizing Kakahashi. And he's like, "Why is this happening?" It's like, "Well, because they love you so much, they'll fulfill any request," which kind of gets, we get into more detail about that later in the series, which is questionable about this action, but this is here for a tone setter, right? Everything's happening so fast, and, Nase here is being very blunt and sort of in the middle, like no real emotional opinions of what to do. Just tells him, "Hey, Kakahashi, not only do you have a red arrow, but you have a white arrow, and you can use that to kill your uncle." And he's like, "What?" And it's like, "Yeah, and if you kill somebody with this, they will die a peaceful death. There's no pain or whatever." Decides like, "You know what? No, that's not me." Make him fall in love. Have him convinced to what he did to his parents so that way he could get arrested. And then we see him lost, confused in a hotel and he was able to convince the guy with the red arrow who owns the hotel to let him stay there for free, trying to figure out what to do for the rest of his life. And now that he has the truth behind his parents and a bunch of other stuff, he is becoming hopeful again and wants to do a second try at his life. Nasu's confused because he says he can make things easy with the red arrows, but Kakahashi wants to put in real effort because there's no meaning behind it. And as things are just about over, Nase confirms that, well, actually, the other reason I'm here is not just to save you, but to bring you into essentially this tournament. He's like, what? Yeah, so I'm one of the 13 angels that were summoned by God to go find somebody to take his place. He's going to retire. And he's like, really? What's going on? It's like, yeah, and if you don't accept this and I leave, I'm taking the hope with me, therefore you're going to want to kill yourself again. Kakahashi doesn't really want that to happen, so he sort of pretty much agrees reluctantly into this, I mean, I say tournament, but like into this poll of who's going to become the next god. And that starts off this monthly series with a total of 58 chapters. And I think it's better to break it down into two sections for this. The first section being the first third, right, where it's really good writing and action. You know, I didn't know what to expect from this series, but when we started getting the heavy shonen stuff coming in here with Kakahashi having to battle, you know, the main antagonist of this series, Uryu, you know, it was a nice surprise, and just the way that they were doing it with Uryu coming in here wearing essentially Kamen Rider outfits and, you know, using that to his advantage with the flight and the way he's attacking people, really shows that these guys know how to do shonen. It's some of my favorite parts of this series, and the only thing I wish is that it stayed like that until the end. You know, there's a big surprise. I think I mentioned it on Twitter, less than 30 chapters in, and we're already done with this aspect of the series. It was pretty crazy because, you know, I really liked what we were seeing. And then moving into the second phase of this series, I thought, okay, actually, you know what? I think I understand what they're doing now. We have to get that kind of stuff in there to really set a precedent of how serious it is that these god candidates are in the world. And then now we could really get into the deep stuff of the series, which of course means character exposition, a lot of arguments, debates about who's going to be the next god candidate. Essentially, it's all now focused on the writing and storytelling, which for me was a plus because guess what? That's this team's strongest point. Look at Death Note, look at Bakuman. It was very intense, serious debates, dialogues, arguments that were very good. So I was thinking, yes, I can't wait to see what's happening next. But then unfortunately, at least for me, and I know some people don't like the ending, but we'll get to the ending at the end. My biggest problem with the series is the fact that this is about death and suicide. And when we get to stuff talking about that, there is the obvious generic questions that everybody has and the basic answers and the comebacks. You know, it's like, well, this, and that about suicide, this, and that about death overall, but what about God? Let's talk about that. A lot of it is very generic. You see it all the time whenever movies or any other forms of media bring it up, and unfortunately, it's the same here in Platinum End. There's nothing different coming in when they have these conversations. One of the other main characters that come in that's a god candidate who's very important towards the end, he is bringing in that generic stuff, and he's the main focus for a good while. And that's kind of, you know, it's boring. I mean, it's the art's there to look at, which is nice, but with all this conversation, it's just not grabbing me because, again, we've seen this so much, and I thought, you know, I could trust this team coming in here to be unique with this aspect, you know. And yes, this character's name is Nakaumi. He's, yeah, just your run-of-the-mill generic. And even when we get another character coming in towards the end who is the next main focus point. It's pretty meh. It's very cliche, so typical. Once you see his design and like what type of character he is, of course he's going this route. And that's sort of the problem overall with the series, is the characters that are the main focus. There are some that are great. Uryu, for example, he was a fantastic antagonist. Everything about him was so strong and compelling. But then you get a character like Kakehashi, our main character. And I know this is on purpose and it makes sense for what they were doing, but he is so normal that it's hard to make him likable. You know, you never really know what he's thinking until we're at those last moments of conflict with him and Uryu, or just even somebody else when they're talking about stuff like this. I say I understand what they're doing because he came from a place that was so below the bar, right? Very depressed, sort of had a Harry Potter upbringing where he was bullied a lot at home, at school. He lived, like, his room was pretty shitty. You know, he hated his existence every day. So to have him be the normal character here is a big step up for his character. So I understand what they're doing. One interesting aspect, though, that was coming in was the main heroine, or the love interest, which was Saki. And we were going an interesting route with her. I was thinking like, oh, we're actually going like this. It's not the typical thing I was thinking of. Okay, because when we see her come in, she shoots the red arrow at Kakehashi. And there could be implications right there about their relationship. They're also childhood friends. So I thought it was going the typical shonen route. But it went somewhere different, and that's what kept me invested with her character. But again, unfortunately, once things got settled and things were established, her character did a total 180, and it's like, oh guys, this is her real personality. She was just holding back for plot's sake. And then we get her real personality, and it's, again, pretty meh, very generic, typical stuff. You know, no depth to her, which is disappointing. And, you know, and there's some really fantastic characters in here, though. Like Mukaido is this older gentleman that shows up who is terminally ill with cancer. You know, so he's already knowing, I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to do my best to make sure whoever I pick is going to be the next guy. He's going to be the god candidate, you know? And it's his driving force, the way he's written, and everything he brings to the table is so fantastic. I was really liking his character. There's some other people that show up, like Hajime. You know, he has a typical background, and the way he is able to overcome it using these abilities is what you expect. But then the stuff that he talks about and the way he uses combat is great. It brought that flair and that difference that we needed for the series. As the rules are established later on in the chapters, it says that each angel have ranks, and the ranks determine what your equipment loadout is. Kakehashi was lucky because Nase was a special rank, which means he gets wings, a red arrow, and a white arrow. But then the tier below that is just a red arrow and wings. And the tier below that is either wings or an arrow. So they essentially have a good way of setting up the pieces. And then what the candidates can do when they are able to obtain extra parts, right? Extra wings or arrows and stuff, and how they utilize that in here is really, really cool. And we haven't even touched on the art yet from our boy Obata, but it's fantastic. There's a nice little effect that he's doing here with the angels and the wings and all that. It has this nice soft glow to it. It's like if you go into Photoshop, blur an extra duplicate layer, and then put the filter on the layer for like a soft overlay or for lighting or something, you get that nice little glow that gives it just that little extra to it. And he's doing that on the angel stuff, and it's really good. I really like it. It makes it interesting. And of course, when we get the colors, it's something I was not expecting how pretty it is. But yeah, art definitely complements all the shonen stuff that's coming in and the action. And then coming in towards the end, you know, it still is intense. And that's based on like the writing and all that. But unfortunately, again, like I said earlier, it just doesn't really hit what it needs to hit all the generic stuff that you're expecting and it happens just keeps, thinking, oh, okay, we're not changing it up. And then as we get towards the end of, all right, well, who's the god that's going to be coming in? And, for a while, it's going the typical shonen route. And so I appreciate them deviating from that and going with the other choice that was in the air for a while. We get a sort of multi-chapter epilogue of the series going through this character's journey as God and just really trying to understand what's going on. And I'm not trying to spoil it because it is a recent end and the anime is coming out soon. So if you guys are interested in the series, give it a read if you want. But yeah, a lot of people were upset at the final chapter. Reading through it, for me, I was the most pissed during the final 2 pages of the series. Just the bigger reveal we get. It is left field for the most part, but I guess it makes sense, but it's still disappointing at the same time because it almost feels like everything we went through for the series was pointless. But I will say the final decision that was made that causes the manga to end, as people were upset about that, I think binging it helped because I clearly saw that this has been set up for a while. And that has to do, with the character that was chosen. That character set out its intentions and what they were going to do the entire time that it was brought up about God candidates and death, So having the choice made makes sense because we have questions, we get to the answer at the end when a candidate becomes God. And then it's like, oh, well, if that's the case, then I could just do what I originally was sought out to do. And then we have that happen, which gives us a result that makes sense. I think it was expected in a sense to happen like that. But my problem with it, as much as it makes sense with the character that does it, it doesn't make the most sense when it comes to what this story is about, right? Platinum End is all about regaining your hope and seeing life in a different light and coming to understand and enjoy it and looking forward to the future that you can create for yourself. And that's all Kakahashi was the whole time. He's this innocent guy who has good moral values, who was at the lowest of lows and understands that there's so much more to life than what he was experiencing for a majority of his life. And so I figured, we were going to get some of that at the end here. And we did. If you really want to have a good ending for this, there is a stopping point before the decision is made. And you could just cut it off there and it's a decent ending. It's not a definitive thing with a lot of pieces coming in, but there's definitely the end of a chapter with Kakahashi and Saki particularly, and what they decide to do. Well, not what they decide to do, but what they do. It's what you would expect as an ending for a manga, because again, epilogues are all about getting the round table. Let's see what our characters are experiencing. We want to root for what the fans have been asking for and what it looked like the story was playing out. And we get that in this multi-chapter epilogue, but then we get the real ending, which is what to do after the questions that all our characters had are answered, right? And that's where it pisses everybody off. And that's where I thought, yeah, that's not worth the whole experience, And if you do want to read this, again, the shonen stuff in the beginning is solid. It's fantastic. I'm pretty sure the anime is going to be doing some good numbers because that's going to be the start. And I would say if that's all you want in a series like this, you can stop there. I think it's like 28 or something, one of those chapters where the shift happens. And once you see it happen, you could just stop if you're satisfied. But if you want, the debate about life, suicide, death, the idea of God, you can keep going, but just be prepared for an ending that you might not be expecting and will definitely not be satisfied with. I think it's pretty unanimous that nobody liked the ending, which sucks to say because, again, this team is strong. I've liked all the work that I've seen them do, and just to see them come in with something that's very unique and doing what they do best, but then coming in with a pretty meh ending is, it just sucks to see, man. And again, it comes to the question is, how hard is it to end a series? And I mean, they had an ending. Like I mentioned, in the middle of that epilogue, you have an ending there. So you could stop there if you decide to go past the shonen stuff. And aside from all that, guys, I think that's all I have to say about Platinum End. I mean, yeah, the anime's coming out. I'm sure it'll be good. But so what did you guys think, particularly about the ending? I want to hear some opinions. Do you have anything positive to say about it? And if you do, you can send us an email at unversepodcast@gmail.com. And of course, we could talk about that on the next episode. And then you could follow us on social media at Unverse Podcast anywhere you go. And we'll let you know when those episodes drop. So thanks, guys. And we'll catch you on the next one.